Shalom to all. Today's daf is in Nedarim daf Samach Beis. We are starting Samach Aleph on Beis, 3 lines up for the bottom at the 2 dots. And today's daf is sponsored Lili Nishmas, Mars, Miriam, Sarah, Bas, Yaakov, Maisha, her Neshama should have an Aliyah, and Lili Nishmas, Rabbi Yachmil, Mordechai, Ben Chaim, his Neshama should have an Aliyah. And the Mishnah said, Ad Shiav Rakayat, Ad Shichbul HaMaktuais, if a person made a neder that something's going to be usher to him until the Kayat, which we had said is the fig harvest, so he's usher until after the Maktuais. The knives are folded up and put away. The Gemara tells us, Tana, we have a brisa, Ad Shichpilu Roiv HaMaktuais. This is until the majority of the knives have been put away. Even if the Neder himself had finished his harvest and he had put away his knife, we still have to go based off when the majority of the knives are put away. Samach Beis Amar on top, Tana, we have a brisa, Hukpilu Roiv HaMaktuais. Once the majority of the knives are folded and put away, Mutaris Mishum Gezel, whatever figs are left are mutter because of Gezel, meaning it's not considered stealing them if someone takes them. Upaturis Min HaMaisers, and they're pater from Meiser. That's because they're hefker. We know that hefker is pater from Meiser. Now we have a number of stories. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Iklola, who asked her, they visited a certain place. Bisman Hukpilu Roiv HaMaktuais. It was already after the time where the majority of the knives were folded and put away. Rabbi have a ka'achel. Rabbi was eating some figs that were left over on the trees. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, loy achel, he didn't eat. Now also Marhain, the owner of the figs came. Amalahu, he told him, Amay le'achel rabbanon, why are both of you eating? Hukpilu Roiv HaMaktuasu. It's already after the time where the knives were folded up and put away. Now Vafal Pikin, even though he said this, loy achel Rabbi Yosef bar Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda did not eat. Kasavar, that's because they thought Mishum Sinias Milsu the Ka'amar Hadein Gavra. This fellow was only telling this to them because of Sinias Milsa. He was upset, he was angry at them. He was saying it in somewhat of a sarcastic manner, and he wasn't very happy with them eating the figs. So even though technically, according to halacha, they were allowed to eat them, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda didn't want to eat them. And another story, Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina Ikla Lahu Asra, he visited a certain place, Bizman Shokbul Rev HaMaktuis, it was at this time, and he was allowed to eat these figs. Hamaka'achel, he was eating figs. Yav Shame, he gave them to his attendant, and Loy Achel, he didn't eat them. Amalei, so he told his attendant, Achel, you can eat them. Kach Amarli, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosef, Mishum Aviv, this is Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yosef, told me the name of his father, Hokbul Rev HaMaktuis, Mutaris Mishum Gezel, Pturis Min HaMaiser, they're mutar because of Gezel, meaning it's not considered stealing them, and they're pater from Meiser, that's because they're hefker. And another story, Reb Tarfon Ashchei, who gav Rizman Hokbul Rev HaMaktuis to Ka'achel. Reb Tarfon was found by a fellow at this point in time, most of the knives were folded up and put away, and Reb Tarfon was eating this fellow's figs. What did this fellow do? Achse Besaka, he stuffed him into a sack, Vishakale, he took him, Amtayel Mishtei Benara, and he was bringing him to throw him into the river. He was going to kill Rabbi Tarfon for eating his figs. Amalei, so Rabbi Tarfon said to him, he didn't really say it to him, he just commented out loud as he was being dragged along in the sack, Oilay the Tarfon Shazahar guy, woe unto Tarfon that this one's going to kill him. Shama hu Gavra, this fellow heard that he was just about to throw Rabbi Tarfon into the river, Shavke Va'arak, he left him and he ran away. And Amar Rabbi Avo, Mishom Rabbi Chanan ben Gamliel, Kol Yom Shal Eiset Tzaddik. The rest of the days of that Tzaddik, meaning Rabbi Tarfon, Hayim Etztar Al Davar Zeh, he was pained regarding this thing. Amar, he said, Oilish Nishtamash B'Kisr Shal Taira, woe unto me that I used the crown of Taira. I used my Taira to get me out of this difficult situation. Anyone that uses the crown of Taira, Nekar Min Oilam, he gets uprooted from the world. Kavachimer, what's a Kavachimer? Belshazzar, he used the holy kelim of Beis HaMikdash, but they were already turned into mundane kelim. Shenever, because it says in the pasuk, Ubo ba pritzim echilua, and pritzim came and they were mechalal it. And what do we learn from here? Kimisha partzum. Once there was a pirza in the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, nasu chayil. The kelim turned into becoming chayil. So really, Belshazzar used kelim that technically had a din of chayil on them, but still nekar min ha'olam, he was uprooted from the world. Tichse, because it says in the pasuk, Baba Laila, that night katal Belshazzar. Belshazzar was killed. So Mishnah B'Kisar Shal Taira, Shu Chai V'Kayim La'olam. Someone who uses the crown of Taira, which is living and remains forever, Alachas Kam V'Kama, for sure a person is going to be uprooted from this world. So Reb Tarfon was pained that he had to use his Torah learning. He had to tell this person that he was Reb Tarfon in order to save himself. So now the Gemara asks on the story of Reb Tarfon, Reb Tarfon, when he was eating this, it was at this time of Hukbul Rev HaMaktuas. Amai Tzarei Hu Gavra. Why did that person cause him pain? Why was the fellow going to hurt him? All the figs that were remaining in the field were hefker. So the Gemara answers, Mishum Hu Havugan Mile Invi Kule Shasa. This fellow had someone stealing his grapes the entire year. Since he saw Reb Tarfon eating his figs, Savar, he figured, I knew the Gunvan, this guy who's eating my figs is the same guy that was stealing my grapes all year. So he bundled him into a sack and was going to throw him in the river. Asked the Gemara, so what was Reb Tarfon so bothered about? Since this fellow was going to kill him, he had to save himself. The Gemara answers, Reb Tarfon Asher Gadol Hava. Reb Tarfon was a very wealthy man, and he should have appeased him with money. Instead of saying, I'm Reb Tarfon, he could have said, I'm very wealthy, let me pay you off. And since instead he used his name, Reb Tarfon, he used the Kesser Shal Taira, that's what he's very pained about. And the Gemara continues talking about using Taira for a person's benefit. Tanya, we have a brayso, La'avas Hashem Lekecha, L'shmai B'kalai, L'dav Kabai. The pasuk says to love Hashem your God, to listen to His voice, and to cling to Him. What do we learn from here? Shalayim Adam, a person shouldn't say, Ekra Sheikruuni Chacham, I'm going to learn psukim psukim so that they can call me Chacham. Eshna shekruni Rabbi. I'm going to learn Mishnayos so they could call me Rabbi. Ashanin sheyezakin ve'eshev yeshiva. I'm going to learn so I can be an elderly person. I can be chashiv and they'll give me a chashiv place in yeshiva. El lamed me'ava. A person should learn Torah out of love. V'seifa kavod lavai. The kavod will eventually come. Shemar the pasuk says, Kasher mal's b'secha. Tie them onto your fingers. Write them on the luach of your heart. Ba'amr in the pasuk says, its ways are ways of peace. Ba'amr in the pasuk says, and Rabbi Lazar bar Tzaddik Aimer, he tells us, do things l'shem pa'alam, meaning for Hashem. B'daber b'hem l'shmam, and speak in them just l'shma, just for the sake of them, for the sake of the words themselves. Al tasim atar l'zgadol b'hem. Don't make them a crown to be glorified through them. Al tasim kardom liyos eider bay, and don't use them as a shovel or a spade to dig with. Belshazzar, he used Kli Kodesh that had already become Kli Chol. He was uprooted from the world. Someone that uses the crown of Torah for his own benefit, for sure he's going to be uprooted from the world. However, we have a slight qualification to this. Rabbi, he says, a person is allowed to make himself known. He's allowed to tell people that he's a Talmid Chacham in a place where they don't know him. Because the pasuk says, your servant, he feared Hashem from his youth. Eliyahu Hanavi wanted to send Ovadia on a mission. Ovadia was afraid he was going to be killed because of it. In order to show Eliyahu that he was on his side, he had to tell him who he was. So I think Reb Tarfon, so now I have a problem with Reb Tarfon. What was wrong with Reb Tarfon telling this person that he's Reb Tarfon? The fellow didn't know who he was, so he's allowed to say, I'm Reb Tarfon. So Gemara says, no, Dasher Gadol Haya, he was very wealthy, and he should have appeased him with money, as we had said before. And since there was an alternative way out, he didn't have to say who he was. That's why he was pained over the fact that he said that he's Reb Tarfon. Now Rava has to steer him psukim. Ksevit says in one pasuk, "Va'avdecha yaris Hashem in urav." Your servant feared Hashem from his youth. Uksev, but another pasuk says, "Yahalcha zar v'loy picha." Let a stranger praise you and not your mouth. So Gemara says, no. Haba asad yadilei, haba asad yadilei. One's talking about a place where they know you, so if people know you, so don't praise yourself. One's talking about a place where people don't know the fellow, so people don't know the fellow, so he's allowed to say who he is. Another qualification of this, Amarava, he says, "Shari le'tzuvim rabbanon lemeimar tzuvim rabbanon." A Talmid Chacham is allowed to say, "I'm a tzuvim rabbanon." Charlie Tigroi Beresha, please sort out my fight first, meaning please see to my din Torah first. Because the pasuk says, "Ubnei David kayhanim hayu." The sons of David were kayhanim. Now we know that the sons of David weren't kayhanim; they were Talmidei Chachamim. But what do we learn from here? Ma kayin noitel b'reish. Just like a kayin, he gets first. He gets everything first. Af Talmid Chacham noitel b'reish. So to the Talmid Chacham, he gets everything first. And Memela, if a Talmid Chacham is sinning and his case needs to be judged, he's allowed to say, "I'm a Talmid Chacham, judge me first." Now, if a kayin minalon, how do we know that a kayin gets served first? Because the pasuk says, "V'kidashtoi kislechem lakecha hu makriv." You should sanctify him because he offers the bread of Hashem. The time of Rabbi Shmuel and the Bryce was taught in the best measure of Rabbi Shmuel, "V'kidashtoi l'chol davar sheva kedusha." You should sanctify him in all matters of kedusha. For example, samach beis on top, liftach rishon. Let him open up first, meaning he gets the first aliyah. Ulevarach rishon, he gets to make a bracha first. Lital mani after rishon, and he gets the first best portion. Now, once we're talking about what a Talmid Chacham is allowed to say, Amarava, he says, "Shari le tzuvim rabbanon lemeimar." Tzuvim rabbanon is allowed to say, "Le'avina karga." I'm not paying the head tax. Because the pasuk says, "Minda beloi v'halach la shalt l'mirma alehain." No one should have the authority to impose on them the following: Minda, Belai, and Halach. Rabbi Yehuda, he says, Minda zumanas hamelech. Minda is the portion of the king. That's the portion that everyone had to give to the king. Belai, what's that? Zek kesef gulgalta. That's a head tax everyone has to pay to the king. V'halach zu arnoina. Halach is arnoina. In modern day Hebrew, arnoina is property tax. Over here, it's not referring to property tax. It's referring to the tax that everyone had to pay for the king's meal as he traveled through cities and towns. A Talmid Chacham is allowed to get out of all of these. As something similar, if Rava says, Tzuvim Rabbanon is allowed to say, I'm the Denurano, Loyavina Karga, I'm an Eved of Nura, I'm not paying the head tax. Now either this means he's saying that he serves the Avodah Zarah Nura, or he's saying that he's the Eved of one of the priests of this Avodah Zarah, and he's saying this in order to get out of the tax. At my time, why is this permitted? He's just saying this to get the lion away from him. He's trying to evade taxes. And it's obvious from his very statement that he's saying this in order to evade the tax. He's not being maida or agreeing to this Avodah Zarah. He's saying very clearly, Avda Denura Ana, therefore I'm not paying the tax. Since it's obviously just saying this in order to not have to pay the tax, it's permitted for him to do this. And Rav Ashi Havaleyahu Abba or Havaleyahu Ava, Rav Ashi had a forest. Zavnei Lebei Nura. He sold it to Bei Nura. He sold it to this house of fire worship. Amrli Ravina Rabashi, Ravina asked Rabashi, Ha'ik lifnei iver l'sitei michshol. You were just over an Isser, lifnei iver l'sitei michshol. Don't put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. And even Gaim aren't allowed to serve Avodah Zarah, and by you selling them your forest, they're going to use the wood for their fire worshipping, and that's Avodah Zarah. So why are you putting this stumbling block in front of them? Amalei, so he explained to him, the majority of wood is for firewood, not firewood for worshipping, firewood for cooking and for heating and things like that. And since I can fairly assume that they're going to use this wood not for their fire worship, but for other more standard uses of wood, therefore it's not considered lifnei iver. And moving on to another Mishnah, this is really just one long continuation of more or less the same case. Let's say a fellow made a neder ad hakatzir until the harvest. So what's he referring to when he says until the harvest? Until the people begin the wheat harvest, but not the barley harvest. And the Mishnah says, everything has to do with the place where he made his neder. Bahar. If he was in the mountain areas when he made this neder, so he goes based off of the harvest in the mountain areas, which starts a little bit later than in the valley. And if he was in the Beka, so he goes based off of when the harvest is in the Beka. And if he happened to have gone from the mountain to the valley, he still has to go based off of the harvest when it is in the mountain, because that's where he was when he made the neder. Now let's say he says ad hageshamim, until the rain, or he says ad shehu hageshamim. So what's he saying? Ad sheter dervia shnia, his neder is until the second rainfall comes. There's 3 different time periods of rainfall: the early rains, the regular rains, and the late rains. So when he says until the rains, he's talking about until the second rain falls. Now Rav Shimon Gamliel, and where he argues and he says ad shegia zmana shel ravia, it's until the time of the rainfall comes, not until the actual rain falls. It's until the time that rain should be falling. Let's say the fellow says ad shepasku geshamim, until the rain stops. So then he's making his neder ad sheyetze Nisan kulay divrei Meir. Rav Meir says he has to wait till after the entirety of Nisan finishes, because that's when the rains stop. Rabbi Huda says, Ad Shiavra Pesach, his neder is only until after Pesach finishes. He doesn't have to wait till the entirety of Nisan is finished. Now the Gemara says, Tanya, you have a brayso, Hanoder Ad Kayetz Begalil. If a person made a neder that he's usher in something until the Kayetz, and he was in Galil, meaning he was in northern Eretz Yisrael, the Yard Lamakim, and then he went down to the valleys, to the lower places, Afal Bishegia Kayetz Bamakim. Even though now it's the harvest in the valley where he currently is, Asr Ad Shegia Kayetz Begalil, he's usher, his neder is chal until the Kayetz starts in the Galil. That's because that's where he was when he made the neder. We're going to stop here for the day, pick up tomorrow, continue to explain the Mishnah. For now, everyone should have a wonderful day.